We are, oh, yeah, that's way up there. Hello, we are about to commence the call to order the city council meeting for February 26, 2024. And by a visual count, I see all councils here, which is exciting, but I will do a roll call. Council Member McCormick,
Here.
Council Member Andori,
Present.
Council Member Candell,
Present.
Vice Mayor Kwok,
Present.
and I am present. So all is present. And we will move on to adoption of agenda. Do you have someone
I
who?
have a motion to adopt the agenda.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion by Councilmember Candell, seconded by Councilmember Andori. So the agenda is adopted.
All in favor?
Excuse me. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It's been a little bit. And I am an aye, so it is unanimous. We are adopting the agenda for tonight. Any public comments for closed session and closed session items only?
Mayor Anduri, I have no speaker slips for
luck.
persons. Mayor Dawson, I have no speaker slips for persons in the hall, and I have no hands raised in our virtual audience.
Thank you. Okay, then we will move on to our closed session and we'll return at 7. So we will therefore temporarily adjourn.
Test. No, you're actually, I think you're right. It doesn't.
They'll tell us when the recording has started.
Okay. Thanks. All right, thank you. Welcome back. Council has come back from closed session and there is no reportable action. So we will move on to agenda item. Oh, okay. The next agenda item, which is the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, next on the agenda is public comments for items that are not on the agenda.
Mayor Dawson, I have a speaker slip from Angela Adams. Angela, if you'll come to the podium, you have 3 minutes to speak.
Welcome, Angela.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Good evening, council. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Angela Adams. I'm representing the Northern Cal Carpenters Union with 17 years experience as a drywall lather metal framer, and here to propose and emphasize on Northern Cal Carpenters labor standards, which includes livable wages, affordable health care, local hiring, and apprenticeship programs. Through these standards, I have witnessed and continue to witness great accomplishments. Apprenticeship programs play a vital role in skill development and ensuring quality work, which in turn strengthens our workforce. Livable wages are essential to sustain working individuals and their families. It's not only fair, but it's crucial. Local hiring is another crucial aspect that contributes to our growth in our economy and empowering our communities. Lastly, healthcare. It is paramount. Developers must be held accountable for the well-being and safety of their workers. Access to high-quality healthcare should be the right for all. It is a safeguard. It safeguards, individuals and the communities. I urge the city council to implement labor standards for all construction workers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Angela. Are there any questions from council? No, thank you.
Mayor Dawson, I have no additional speakers at this time.
All right, thank you. We will move on to our next item, the city manager's update.
Thank you, Mayor Dawson. Good evening, everyone. An update from the various city departments. From the planning department, progress is being made on 2 approved multifamily projects. The Terraces of Lafayette continues with preparations of plans for a mass grading permit, and site work could begin this fall. And then the 23-unit Huff Avenue project has received its construction loan, and so we should be seeing on-site activity fairly soon. Staff will be meeting with the State Department of Housing and Community Development tomorrow to discuss that department's letter on the housing element, which you will be discussing later at this meeting. An update from the Land Acknowledgement Task Force. The task force has met twice this year and has finalized plans for new street signs to be installed at the intersection of Mount Diablo Boulevard and Lafayette Circle. The signs will be modified to include the Ohlone name for Mount Diablo, which is Tushtak. The task force has also finalized the educational sign that, once completed, will likely be installed in the rain garden and at the community center and perhaps even at the reservoir. And the plan is to have all these signs installed within the next 3 to 4 months. Public Works has started weed abatement in the medians, and weeds are very prevalent this year. So you will see our crew replacing the mulch layer this spring and summer to help reduce the growth of weeds and also to help reduce water consumption during the summer. The Parks, Trails, and Recreation Department would like to thank La Marinda CERT for their generous donation of 12 5-gallon emergency water containers for the community center. For those who don't know, La Marinda CERT, it's an excellent local organization with great training, and you can find them at lamarindacert.org. And finally, a reminder that the Lafayette Green Award nominations are due February the 29th. And anyone is encouraged to nominate a Lafayette neighbor, colleague, organization, or a local business that has contributed to making our city a greener place through individual or collective actions. And the awards will be announced in April at a joint meeting of this City Council and the Environmental Task Force. And that's it for my presentation.
Thank you. I'd like to call for any public comments in the city manager's report.
I have no speaker slips and no hands raised.
Okay, thank you, Narup. And we will move on to presentations, item 10A, which is my pleasure, and to introduce recognition for Therese Kane, who works in our staff. And Therese, with her usual care and due diligence, encountered an unusual circumstance where she acted to help one of our residents in a time of need. So I am going to continue with the presentation, but first I'd like to call upon anybody for public comments on this.
Mayor Dawson, I do have 2 speaker slips. Claudia Bubeck, followed by Erling Horn.
Thank you. Welcome, Claudia. If you'd like to come to the podium here.
My name is Claudia Bubeck, and I suffered a stroke the morning of February 2nd. And I was on the phone to the planning department asking about getting a permit to take down a tree. And in the middle of this conversation, I suddenly started saying words that had no relationship to anything else. And I was baffled. I felt fine. And I went and sat down, and about 3 minutes later, the EMTs arrived, thanks to Mrs. Kane. Thank you very much for being so quick off the mark.
Thank you so much, Claudia.
Our next speaker, Erling Horn.
Erling Horn, Windsor Drive in Lafayette. I just want to give thanks to Teresa. Her perception in this sort of crisis situation is just absolutely remarkable and unusual to ferret out enough information over 2 wires on a public telephone system going many miles away is quite remarkable. So I would just simply want to add my voice to the people that will honor her. And this is a very appropriate piece of paper. More than that. Thank you, Teresa. Most excellent work.
Yes.
Mayor Dawson, may I explain for the benefit of the public, give a little more background. So it was a Friday, and Therese answered the phone and spoke to Miss Claudia, and sensed that there was a health emergency underway. The call ended, but Therese didn't give up. She tried to go through our phone records to see if there was a number to call back, couldn't find it, left a message with the police department, and then just Googled the number, and she knew that our resident lived on Moraga Boulevard, found the number, then called 911. And when I was talking to her and I said, thank you for doing it, she said, I thought to myself, if it was all for nothing and there was no emergency, so what? I'd have egg on my face, but I don't care. I did it. And that really exemplifies the caring that's Therese Kane.
Thank you.
Mike Moran.
I promise to turn in a speaker slip if I need to, but I just wanted to emphasize what Narup said. First, I also just want to say, although she called the planning department, she was talking to engineering. Teresa is our engineering representative at the front line. And I just wanted to emphasize what Narup said. She had to go through investigative techniques to get back and find an address and a phone number and get the EMTs to the house, because she didn't have even a phone number, just a name. And she'd remembered a street name, and had to do investigative techniques just to find, where to send help. So, which doesn't surprise us in the engineering department that she could and would do such things, but really happy that it worked out this way this time. So thanks so much, Therese.
Dana Anderson.
My name is Dana Anderson. I have had the joy and pleasure of sitting next to Therese for 18 years. What happened on Friday, I had no idea. She said, I had a really weird phone call. I'm going to go out in the hall for a little bit. And I said, okay. And she comes back about 5 minutes later and sits down and proceeds to do her job for the rest of the day. I had no idea until Monday what had happened. So that tells you the reserve and calmness that Therese uses every single day that I wish I could share. And it has been a joy and pleasure to work with her and share our space together. So just wanted to give my 2 cents.
Thank you, Dana. Is there any further public comment?
No additional public comments.
Okay. What I'd like to do is just acknowledge Therese, as I did when I found out. Some people might say this is above and beyond, but I think for you, it is exemplary of the way you work and the way you care about the residents in our community. So it's just very impressive and very wonderful. So it is our pleasure to present you with a plaque, and I'm going to read the inscription and then I'll come out to present it to you. But Therese Kane, in recognition of your life-saving action on February 2nd, 2024, on February 2, 2024, while working the front counter at the City of Lafayette office, you were helping a resident with a tree permit by phone. During the conversation, the resident began to have trouble communicating. You quickly identified the resident by maybe experiencing a medical emergency. Excuse me. Utilizing a planning department database, you were able to locate the resident's address. You immediately called 911 and provided the emergency operator with the necessary information. Emergency personnel were dispatched to the resident's home and located her unconscious at home by herself. The resident was transported to the hospital, where it was determined she had suffered a stroke and she was hospitalized. Due to your situational awareness and quick action, you were directly responsible for the resident receiving life-saving medical attention. Thank you for your dedication and commitment to serving the citizens of Lafayette.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. I'm sorry. Mayor Dawson, City Council members, dear Naroop's City Manager. Special thanks to Chief Ben Aldred and to Community Services Officer Kathy Surgis Moscato, who I believe had a great deal, all of you, in this wonderful plaque, which I will treasure always. I'm sure it's a once in a lifetime happening, so I will really treasure it always. But in accepting it, I'd like to send Claudia my continuing best wishes for her good health. And thank you so much for calling back on Monday to let us know that you were fine. That was wonderful. Thank you. And I'd like to thank all the first responders, fire department, police, all the medical personnel who were involved in helping providentially bring this medical emergency to a successful conclusion. And I'd like to pay special tribute to the invaluable services of the 911 service, who daily provide life-saving services to the city of Lafayette and elsewhere, oftentimes unheralded. So thank you, City of Lafayette. Thank you.
And Claudia, thank you again for your testament. Very appreciate your presence here. Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll move on to the introduction of our new employee, Ashlyn Brookshire.
Ashlyn is on Zoom. We'll wait for her.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome, Ashlyn.
Thank you. Hi.
Ashlyn,
Yeah,
I'm going to introduce you. This is Naroop. We
great.
can't see you. You're not on video.
Let me turn it on.
Thank you.
Hello.
I'm so pleased to introduce Ashlyn Brookshire. Ashlyn is a UC Berkeley alumna who graduated with an urban studies degree in 2022. She has previous experience in transportation planning, working for Fair and Pierce. She's worked on the Napa Valley Vision Zero plan and the Merced County Active Transportation Plan. Ashlyn is passionate about improving communities through planning. In her free time, she likes to travel and sing with her a cappella group called the Trill Seekers. We are delighted to have Ashlyn on our planning team.
Thank you.
I'm very
Ashlyn,
excited to be part
welcome.
of the team. Thank you.
Would you like to, yes, continue with some introduction to yourself?
Naru pretty much covered it. I
Anything
have
you
a
want to add?
background in transportation and I'm excited to be on the team and work for the city of Lafayette.
Well, we're excited to have you. You're joining a great team, and it sounds like from your experience, you're going to be a wonderful addition. So we're excited to have you on board.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ashlyn. Okay. We'll see Ashlyn next at city offices. So moving on to the presentation of the Public Art Committee. Well,
Mayor Dawson, City Council. I'm Jenny Rosen. We haven't met. Public Art Committee Liaison. Tour here. There, that's a little better. Okay. Jenny Rosen, Public Art Committee Liaison. And it's truly a pleasure to be here tonight. It's a wonderful night to be here, actually. And to be here with members of the Public Art Committee who are going to provide you with an annual update of their goals and accomplishments for the past year. And I just want to add before our chair, Dave Dondero, gets started, that it's truly a pleasure and an honor for me to have this position with the city and to work with this group of people. They're remarkable volunteers who put in endless amounts of hours for the aesthetic beautification of the city. And I really do appreciate them. So with that, this is Chair Dondero.
Thanks. I don't see the slides.
We have a slide presentation.
Not actually sure. Oh, there it is. Excellent. All right. Thank you, Jenny, for that intro. We should probably start by letting the folks from the committee who are here introduce themselves. Yeah.
Yuki Fujimoto.
Erlinghorn.
Of course, you know Jenny, and I'm Dave Dondero, the outgoing chair, and one of the last functions at the end of chair's tenure is to report out to the council. So it's my pleasure to do that. You can see the rest of the committee members listed here, and you can also see how many subcommittees, work groups, and ad hoc committees that these folks are also engaged in. So it's not just the monthly meeting of the Public Art Committee itself, but also a number of in some cases, very active subcommittees and ad hoc committees. So I wanted to recognize that. Most of the details are in the staff report. I just wanted to take a couple minutes to do some quick highlights for you. One of the bigger highlights last year that many of you may recall is when we proposed a downtown Lafayette mural program, and that was adopted here last year. And since then, we've retained a highly regarded consultant and art curator, ABG Art Group in Oakland, and have identified some high-value wall locations and have spent considerable time working through the mechanics, the operational mechanics, drafting contracts and things like that. And we hope in the following years, you'll see in our future work to begin to engage building owners and get the first mural up in 2024. What you see here is one of our high-value walls with a couple of mock-ups, artist renderings of what a mural might look like in that in that location. Some of the other work we did was the very visible utility box art program in collaboration with the Lafayette Historical Society. There were a number of utility box wraps that were installed, and then to support that, we also created a self-guided walking tour, which you can see there. That can be downloaded on the web and I think accessed through a kiosk here in the library. Yeah. We also reviewed the proposed design and color palette for the barriers in Lafayette, so no more orange barrels. And then we curated a number of exhibitions. There were 5 different artists and 2 different artist groups in 3 shows, both here at the library's public art gallery and 4 shows at the town hall theater lobby gallery. And one of those in particular, we wanted to highlight. It was a community art event with artist Jana Verba as part of the opening for her show of paintings, was this social practice piece that was done on the sidewalk that was recognizing the bombing of a similar town theater in Mariupol, Ukraine, where children were killed. So that was a very visible connection of art to something that normally would be a little disconnected because it's on the other side of the world. We have several active art development projects, including the Brant at Mount Diablo Boulevard and Dolores Drive, which is, I think, nearing completion if they ever get those last windows in. There are both mosaics done by ceramic artist Eileen Barr, and what we hope will be one of the more compelling pieces to go into Lafayette. It's a large stainless steel piece with the Brant geese in flight on it. You can see in the artist rendering that it's quite tall, more than twice my height, designed by the art group Wow House. So someday when that project is done, that piece will go in. We're excited about it. And then the dandelions piece. Oh, I'm sorry. The other active one is, the other 2 active projects right now are at Madison Park on Golden Gate Way and at 950 Huff Street. And that piece is not, the piece that's shown here is by the artist. It's not the proposed piece, but it is a piece by the proposed artist for the Huff project. Neither of these have been, or I'm sorry, the Madison project, neither of these pieces these projects have been approved yet. And then the Dandelion project, which is slated for the Lafayette Town Center pathway and the BART bike station, that's awaiting BART funding, but we hope will go in 2025. So those are the things we've been working on. Here are some of the things we're going to continue to work on. A lot of this is detailed in the staff report that Jenny put together. And it's likely that the next time that we will see you as a council will be when we make recommendations for revisions to the city's public art plan. And I'll take any questions.
Thank you, David, and thank you all of you for being here tonight. Are there any questions or comments from council? No, I'll just say thank you for all this work. And I know it is an incredible amount of work and you guys divvied it with your subcommittees. But like, for instance, the 175 plus years and the walking tour, a lot went into that, obviously the mural program. So do appreciate and value the work you've put in and to helping beautify our city and educate us as well, add to our cultural dimension of Lafayette. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you. You guys definitely deserve the applause. I'm sorry that I have to interrupt with asking for public comment. Thank you.
No speaker slips and no raised hands, so no comment.
Okay, so we'll continue. Thank you. Oh,
Yeah, I
Councilmember
just
Andrei.
wait till after the public comment. I just want to say, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for everything you've done in the last year and before. This is a very hardworking committee. I have the privilege of attending some of the meetings, and it's just, it's really inspirational to see the people on this committee coming up with ideas for things and doing this to make Lafayette a city where art is visible almost everywhere you go. And if it's not visible now, it will be, because that's what the committee is working on. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Andre. Good night. And now we will proceed to the next item, which is the consent calendar. Is there any items that council wishes to pull?
I'd like to pull 11B.
11B. Okay. Anyone else? Is there anybody in the public that wishes to pull an item?
Mayor Dawson, I have no speaker slips to pull an item, nor do I have any raised hands.
Okay. Thank you. Then do I have a motion to move forward?
Yeah, I'll move adoption of items 11A, C, D, E, and F on the consent calendar.
Second.
Thank you. All right, all in favor of adopting the consent calendar with the omission of item 11B, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope, I am an aye, so it's unanimous to pass the consent calendar.
And I'd also like to move that we take this item, we move it up before item 12.
Thank you. Okay, I will, a second to that.
A second.
Okay, so can we adopt that as just amending the agenda? Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. It is unanimous that we'll move that ahead of the next item. So we'll go directly to that. Okay. Then that is right now, right? So we will go to address this 599 Silverado Drive. Request for construction. Councilmember Kendall, did you want to ask a particular question or?
So we did receive some letters about this project, and it did get, and the staff recommendation is to approve it with the modifications and with the geotechnical report saying that the creek bed, but I just wanted to, I did ask Mala whether we could enforce this because the ADU laws are, they're complicated, and can we enforce our setbacks for these things? And yes, we can. This is within our perusal to be able to undo this. And I just thought that we would consider that here. If people have any questions, and we would consider not approving, not going against staff recommendation and going against him to be able to go into our creek setbacks and not set a precedence that we probably don't want to be setting. So that's why I pulled it.
I'm sure as pulling that, we can discuss that. Do you want to have a particular point to discuss in terms of?
There's a staff report. We can have Matt, I guess, come up and talk about it.
Welcome, Matt.
Good evening, everybody. So in a nutshell, this is the construction of a deck within the creek setback area off the back of an ADU. So it really has nothing to do with the ADU specifically. It's just the deck. The deck is small enough and close enough to the ground that it did not require a building permit. The issue was that the county building inspector told the owner and the contractor that they didn't need a building permit for the deck. So they moved forward with it under the assumption that they were fine to do it because a building official told them they didn't need a building permit. I have subsequently spoken with Gary Faria, who's in charge of the building inspection department at the county, asking him what happened. And do your does your staff look for creek setback violations? And he said, not really. But what they are supposed to do is send people back to the city to get approval for things that deviate from the approved set of plans. The approved set of plans in this case did not show a deck. That wasn't done for whatever reason. So the owner went forward with her project, built the deck. We received a complaint from a member of the public. So we inspected the site, found that the deck was built in the creek setback area. Let the homeowner know the process that you have to go through in order to get approval to leave the deck in the creek setback area. She has subsequently gone through that process, and staff has recommended approval for this, partly because of the extenuating circumstances and that she was told by a building official that she did not need anything further for building the deck. But to try and avoid these sorts of problems happening in the future, the engineering department is going to put holds on all building projects that have a creek setback on the parcel, so that we can inspect the site to make sure that nothing additional was added to the project within the creek setback area before the owner gets occupancy. That way, the owner isn't left holding the bag because they still have a contractor that they presumably haven't given a final payment to. If there's a problem, they have some measure of being able to remedy that with their builder without all the costs being entirely on them. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Thank you. So how many of these exemptions have we given out? How common is this?
I should have looked that up, but I didn't. I think there are probably more than 20, fewer than 40.
Okay.
There are quite a few of them. Most of them are for things like additions to a master bedroom or additions to a kitchen, where the person couldn't do the addition on a different part of their house because a master bedroom off of your kitchen doesn't really work. You need to do a master bedroom addition off the master bedroom. So those are typically what they look like. The ones that we typically tell people no on are things like they want to build a swimming pool in the creek setback area, and we tell them you should build it on the other side of your house outside of the creek setback area. Those are the ones that usually get rejected. I don't know of any that have ever been appealed to the city council that I've rejected. I think people have just accepted that rejection and moved on.
Thank you. Those excellent.
Thanks. Any other questions, comments?
Well, I was going to say, I think I appreciate the explanation. I also think it's great that there's a remediation to the process to make sure we don't get stuck in this process again. Because I think it sounds like there was a lot of misunderstandings and not knowing the rules. But it certainly sounds like this was not unprecedented. This is relatively common for this kind of structure, which is good to hear, and I think mitigates the concern. So thank you.
Councilmember Andre?
Yeah, and you and I had a fairly long conversation this afternoon. Just want to confirm that the primary condition that has to be made before this can be approved is that there is no likelihood of danger to public or property. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And so that's just the first hurdle that has to be cleared. If that hadn't been cleared, we'd be
It would have been
definitely
denied.
taking action.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And if they had come to you with an application before building it, you told me you would look to see if there's someplace else they could put this deck. And if there was no other place, then most likely you would have approved it in this location.
That is correct.
Okay, because this, based on your judgment and reliance on the certification from the engineer, you think this would be acceptable?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. And I just want to add to that. I know sounds like a lot of us had conversations with you earlier. And thank you, Councilmember Candell, for bringing this out, because we know we don't want this to be precedent setting. But by asking these questions and having them confirmed, there is, allowances you've made, as Councilmember Andori points out, that the civil engineer has gone through this and you've approved that, and this is an exception. And you've also put into place some, parallel and working with the county as well as here in terms of holding these until they can be looked at. So I appreciate that you've also presented a remedy to this happening in the future. So I'll open this up to any public comment.
Mayor Dawson, I do have a speaker's slip. Debbie Brubaker.
Welcome, Debbie.
Hope this is a good outcome as the other things that were here tonight. Ladies and gentlemen of the council, in the summer of 2021, it became apparent that I needed to move out of my Victorian home that I rented for over 40 years in San Francisco to be close to my parents to help with their care. They're in their 90s. My mom has mobility issues and my dad has Alzheimer's. Even on the best of the days, this can be stressful and extremely taxing. We do our best, but having an overlay of anonymous complaints takes a further toll. My parents are on limited incomes, and I am too. I could not afford to purchase a home in or near Lafayette, so our solution was to put an ADU next to our family home that my parents bought over 50 years ago. I moved into the ADU of May of last year. I brought with me 2 rescue cats that are my companions, and their preferred place of hanging out is the small catio outside my bedroom on the small deck. They are not free to roam. This is to prevent them from hunting small animals and from them not to be hunted by larger animals. In response to the complainer's letter, I trusted the company that I'd hired, Adore Homes, to build and permit the ADU properly and to do what was needed. The ADU company had contacted the county about permits for a deck. The county was fine with the deck size and also the shed that's there too, because they were sized that were under requiring permits. Since the county's inspection and approval of the entire property was finalized in January of 2023, I have additionally completed with due diligence the requests that the city of Lafayette has requested of us. City staff has given us approval. Also note that when walking the trail of the park behind our house, the creek cannot be seen. You have to stand and stare hard through the trees to see the deck of my ADU. It's not very big. And you have to look through the foliage. What the complainer is asking us to do creates for us a very serious financial hardship. We cannot afford to do what he suggests, which is tearing everything down and then maybe building something else, and I don't know. It's my wish to finish this without any further acrimony or legal actions and for me to focus on helping care for my parents. I respectfully ask the council abides by the recommendation of the Lafayette City staff for approval of this matter. Thank you. Oh, and I brought visual aids just because they're important to me.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming out.
Thank you.
Are there any other public comments?
We have no additional public comments.
All right. Are there any other comments for discussion from council? Councilmember Andre.
Yeah, I did want to say I did have a telephone conversation with a member of the Creeks Committee who was here earlier but is not, and who was, it also had a conversation with Matt and was, oh, there he is. Can you fill out a speaker slip and comment on this item? Just what you told me, because I want to make clear that the member of the Creeks Committee, because there was in the letter that we received comments about impact on the creeks, and so I thought it was useful to get Mr. Clark's thoughts.
Our next speaker is David Clark.
Good timing, David.
Okay, you caught me seriously. You got me at a disadvantage. So what, no, I know what you're talking about, but
Yeah, we're talking about 11B.
Right.
And we had discussed your thoughts on whether this should be approved or not.
well, it already has been approved. So I think my thoughts were, do we want to unapprove it. Or I talked to Matt last week, just the two of us informally about the item that's on the agenda. And he explained, he went through the process of how it got there and how he made the decision that he made in order to grant the exception. And all of that made sense to me. And it didn't seem to me there was a need to second guess that. So in a perfect world, do we want to see decks encroach the easement area? No. But this one was already done before he even saw it. So it became kind of a balancing act. My understanding was it became a balancing act as to, okay, we have this now. Our choice is really, are we going to undo it or live with it and try to change the procedure so that it doesn't happen again in the future? And it's a relatively small impact. So given all that, I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that's what the decision, that's how I understood what the decision process was to arrive at that conclusion. And I was, I was okay with that.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, it's not what would have chosen to begin with, but given that's what we have, that was, we were okay with that. And I did check with Will Elder, the chair of the Creeks Committee, and he concurs. And it was just the two of us, so it's not a committee meeting.
Understood.
All right.
Thank you, David.
Can I?
Yeah,
So
please.
thank you, everybody. And I appreciate all this. And thank you for working on fixing the process. Thank you for building ADUs. We love those in our city. And I'm going to take away any of the objections that I may have had. I think that we should definitely approve this.
Okay, I just want to ask if it would be under our purview to send a letter to the builder with a copy of our creeks regulations.
I think that would probably be good, because I don't know how much they're going to be working here, but I think it would be really good.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, that would be good, because we, obviously, not that they're getting away with it, but if they aren't aware, otherwise it would be good.
Send them a gentle reminder.
A gentle reminder, yes. Okay, all right, then we shall take a vote to a motion to adopt.
Okay, so
recommendation.
I'll move that we approve the request for a creek setback exception at 599 Silverado Drive and authorize the city manager to execute the required standard agreement with the property owner.
A second.
And before we vote, I just want to say for precedential purposes that I'm not taking into consideration at all who owns that property, why the ADU was built, any of that. That doesn't, who the people are who own it, that doesn't factor into my vote.
Thank you. Yes, we are impartial. We are looking at the staff report and the policy and at that. Okay, all in favor of approving the recommendation?
Aye.
When I am an aye, it is unanimous. Thank you very much, Matt. All right, let's catch up here. We are moving on to old business. Welcome, Greg and Diana.
I'll go ahead and get started while the slide deck hopefully comes up. Good evening. We are back before you with an update on the housing element update process. As you know, we were last before you in November of 2023, at which time you gave direction to make final revisions to the draft housing element and to submit that to the state after the statutory 7-day public review period. We did. That was submitted and received by HCD on December 14th, and at which time it began the 60-day period during which HCD had to review and provide comments to the city and a determination as to compliance with state law. On day 60, which was 2 weeks from today, we got a letter. It was shorter than prior letters and indicates that progress has been made and we are closer to certification, but not fully compliant with state law in HCD's finding. And so we're back before you with a brief update on that. After receiving the letter on the 12th, we immediately reached out to HCD and requested a meeting to further understand several of their comments, because there are consistent language used between the letters and themes. And whereas we have made our best efforts previously to address those in resubmittals, clearly it is not satisfactory to HCD. And so we need their engagement and direction on what constitutes a satisfactory response. So happy to report that our new reviewer, Joanna Cheng, was very responsive. We set up a meeting date that is tomorrow. And so that is positive movement, and we're encouraged by that. And so we plan to keep that going. Tomorrow will not be our one and only meeting with them. We will request additional meetings and bring back to you in March the initial set of policy analysis and guidance based on the outcome of tomorrow's meeting. We've also engaged Veronica Tam Associates, who has assisted other communities with a multitude of communities with getting certification for their housing elements, including two that Diana Elrod has worked on in the Bay Area. And so with that, Diana will take you through some slides we've prepared, and we'll look forward to our recommendation, which is to continue it to March 11th, where we can provide you with additional information. But I'll turn it over to Diana.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you. Good evening. Also, I just wanted to mention that Veronica is also online. She's from Southern California and has extensive experience with the earlier deadlines for Southern California jurisdictions. So she's been very helpful in a variety of ways in the North Bay here, and is here to answer any questions also. Next slide, please. So tonight's recommendation is fairly brief. It's to receive our presentation, direct staff, and continue the matter to March 11th, 2024. Just as background, I want to go and remind everyone that on October 23rd of 2023, the council endorsed the housing element update revisions we made and directed staff to send to the State Department of Housing and Community Development, known as HCD. On November 13th, though, the council considered additional information on the income distribution methodology and directed staff to make further revisions to the housing element update and submit it to HCD. As Greg mentioned, we did do that on the 14th of December, and we received our letter on February 12th, exactly 60 days later. So I want to talk first about the key takeaways. This is the first time in a letter from HCD that they have signaled the city is closer to certification. The quote is, "The element will meet the statutory requirements of state housing element law once it has been revised, adopted, submitted, and reviewed by HCD to comply with the above requirements pursuant to Government Code Section 65585. I think it's really important at this time to note that the changes noted in the letter are not requests, but requirements. They're very clear that what we have to do they are requiring us to do, and we will not be able to receive certification unless we do them. As Greg mentioned, when we meet with HCD tomorrow, we're going to get some additional guidance on some of their comments, specifically what they mean are the concrete actions the city must take to satisfy the comment. And obviously, once we get this information from HCD, we will bring it back to the council at the beginning of March. A summary of the overall required changes are as follows. They wanted us to revise implementation programs to add specific metrics, geographic targeting, or specific commitments and what actions the city will take if those metrics are not met. Some of these include, for example, monitoring the so-called missing middle actions, including faith-based organizations and other actions to address mobility concerns. So adding an action in the middle of the cycle to say, we will look and see how we've done, and if we haven't gotten to where we think we will, then what are we going to do to change it to facilitate further development? The second was a further explanation on the status of pipeline projects, the redevelopment of small sites, and the criteria against which sites were measured for suitability in the inventory. And lastly, additional narrative discussing how the city's suite of AFFH actions will address mobility opportunities, since the city is an all highest resource community, and they want further commitments around the same. For example, metrics of we are targeting X number of units for these actions. Next slide. There are, in addition to these sort of general things, there are 5 different aspects that we're presenting to you tonight. We won't be discussing them per se. We're happy to answer questions about them, but that you will need to give us, council, your direction on when we come back to meet with you in March. And specifically, we expect to provide recommended actions for you to consider. With respect to this first one, which is really about lot consolidation, since the city uses a number of sites that would consolidate lots, the state wants us to commit to establishing certain incentives by a specified date. And we've highlighted here the specifically important note in their comment. These incentives should be significant and include density incentives, not limited to state density bonus law. We don't know exactly what they mean by that, which is one of the things we're going to ask them, but essentially we want to know, are we supposed to give more density to a developer if they decide to consolidate lots in order to get them to consolidate lots? Let's put it that way. Next slide, please. So that's 1. Number 2, publicly owned sites. The program should add discrete timing for assisting with funding and issuing permits, and should commit to alternative actions by a specified date if the sites are not developed in the planning period. This is really in reference to 949 Moraga, basically the city's parking lots. You may know that the requirements connected with the Surplus Land Act are getting much more stringent. There's a concern that the city we're going to ask about this one also tomorrow, that the city would have to do a number of discrete actions, like list when the RFP for the site would be submitted, when would a developer be selected, when would any sort of agreements be made, et cetera, to the point where it might make it very difficult to comply. And if the sites are not, and the reason this is so important for us to consider in here is because we're counting on that site as part of the inventory. If the city, and one thing that we can discuss when we next meet, if the city decides not to include it in the inventory, but continue to work on developing it, this particular issue may go away. I mean, if we're not relying on it for the inventory, then this particular item would go away. We would still want to do something. We might reference it, but it would not be an action item, and we would take it out of the inventory. And right now, I believe there are 22 below market rate units associated with that site. And a preliminary analysis, if you'll recall from, well, you probably don't remember as well as I do, but if we were to take out those 22 units, it would reduce the buffer for the inventory by a very small amount. But we'll talk about that. I'm not done with a second. Go back.
Can I just quickly ask a question? We only had 22 below market?
Yes.
On 949?
Yes.
Okay, I thought we had set that at more than 50%.
There's a total of 22 units, I believe. That's it.
At 949?
Yes.
Okay.
It's only at 35 DU per acre to begin with.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. The third item, it pertains to local processing and permit procedures. And if specifically they're talking about, what this is about is if you have in your ordinance any discretionary triggers or any kind of discretionary language, the state wants it to be removed. Specifically, things like, yes, we have all these objective design standards, but having a phrase that says something like, and it should fit in well with the community, HCD in discussions with Veronica is asking or telling jurisdictions they must remove that language from their ordinances. Anything that's could be construed as discretionary. And so at the bottom here, the highlighted part is clarify that complying with objective design standards will be deemed to meet approval findings. In other words, the city has to be clear that it cannot deny a project because it doesn't fit in. So they want to remove any discretionary language from ordinances pertaining to this one. And this one is all up and down the state. This one, jurisdictions are being hit with this one. Next slide, please. Number 4, this one also is one that is obviously very difficult probably for the city to think about what we're going to do with this one. This program should specifically commit to revising height setbacks and upper story setbacks to facilitate achieving maximum densities. Translated, this is the city must commit to increasing heights and decreasing setbacks. How this works is we still need to ask questions about what that would look like from HCD, but this is one that we've said we'll look at it. The state is clear that the city needs to commit to actually increase heights and commit to doing that and decreasing setbacks. Then the last one is the allowing the conversion of existing single family. In this program, as you probably note, we had a long discussion about this one. This is to convert single family houses into 2 to 4 units, like develop them in the existing envelope. And we had it from a quarter of a mile from the boundaries of the downtown. The program should, and this clause, we don't understand, we need to ask, also allow the conversion of single family space for a new single family uses. I don't know what that means. We're going to ask that tomorrow. But the big thing for you also to consider that could consider increasing the allowable distance from downtown. This is the 3rd time that this comment has come up from the state, both in writing as well as in conversations, at least the 3rd time, maybe even the 4th. The state has clearly stated that it wants to see a half mile from the downtown, not a quarter mile. Now, there are ways we can consider, which we'll bring back to you. One of those might be just to say, okay, we'll do it a half a mile from the downtown, pushing it southward, and just say, but we're not going to do anything in the very high fire hazard severity zones. That's one way to do it. So aside from getting direction on what they mean by conversion of single family space for new single family uses, we'll have to come back, you'll have to have a conversation about changing the distance. We don't believe at this point, considering that they brought it up at least 3 times, they are not going to let this one go. Next slide, please. So in terms of timelines and tasks, right now, minor revisions are already underway, things that are simple enough that are basically clarifying either timelines or fixing something that they thought they caught an error in, something like timing didn't work, whatever. We have our meeting with HCD tomorrow for clarification on various items. We will bring back the discussion items noted on March 11th. And then after that, we will finalize documents, bring back for your final approval and resubmit to HCD following 7-day review period. Now, we may be able to have some back and forth with HCD without just sort of technical revisions, but we are not going to know that. We don't know that, we don't think that necessarily that we're going to have to go back for yet another 60 days. We're hopeful that when we meet with HCD tomorrow, that they will really engage with us, since we haven't really been able to get them to engage with us until now. Last slide. So our request is to receive this presentation and continue the matter to March 11th and direct staff to continue with the minor revisions to the element and appendices and prepare an analysis and recommendations on the 5 areas that I outlined above for council consideration. Happy to answer any clarifying questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Dory, is that your hand raised? Okay.
Who are you meeting with tomorrow?
Joanna Chang, who is our reviewer, she's relatively new. We've not met her before, and Paul McDougall, who is the head of that unit.
Okay, great. And do you think it would be helpful to have a special council meeting next Monday to brief us on that conversation? I just raised that. I'm trying to think, I at least would like to know as soon as possible what direction, what you learned from HCD. I don't think we would need a staff report. Just have a single item meeting where we can all be briefed. I just raised that. We can discuss that later. I guess I'm asking questions now. Do you think that would be helpful to do that?
I don't know that we would be prepared with a week from today, following tomorrow's meeting, to give you substantive analysis and recommendations on, because the staff report would need to be prepared in advance based on what, and I heard no need for a staff report. However, if there's going to be kind of discussion around it and policy direction, we would want to have that analysis ready to present on a Monday meeting. So I think we could have a largely one-way delivery of information, what we heard from HCD, and that would be informative to you. We would need the extra few days, because it would be a day or two later that we would need the staff report done for the March 11 meeting. So if you're eager, and maybe we can get input from the city manager, city attorney, on whether just an informational email that goes out to the council, which also is, posted to the website in advance of going out to the council. So like what we heard HCD say, we could take it in any form and report out as soon as we have some degree of clarity around certain items.
Okay, so I guess we can discuss that once we get to the discussion period.
Yes, and we'll ask.
And so just the other question. First, I have to say, I am really, well, not happy about any of this, but I'm happy to hear you say you don't understand what they're saying on some of these things. I just put question marks by them. I know what is it they mean. So I'm glad we're all in the dark on that, and that you'll learn more tomorrow.
Councilman McCarr.
All right. Thank you for the presentation. And I know I'm new to the HCD language, but I kind of question the basic premise that we're going in with this, that we're thinking we're getting closer and we're just having solved a few problems. Because I mean, when I read the letter, I mean, there's a particular line, as noted above, the element does not include a complete site analysis. Therefore, the adequacy of the sites and zoning were not established. And that worries me. I mean, I'm sure you'll talk about that tomorrow, but I'm curious, that line to me says they kind of didn't even, there's a whole nother level of analysis going to come out that could really change fundamentally what the sites that we've got. And I worry a little bit that we're going into it thinking we're just kind of answering very specific questions. And in fact, there's still a big question that's unanswered. So I'd love to get your.
Well, a lot of this happens to be boilerplate. It is in every letter, if you haven't completed it. In consultation with Veronica, she and I both agree that these, with the exception of the 5 items that are pain points for the city, the rest of them are very minor to do. They're technical changes that need to be made.
And I was going to ask about that very same line, because to me, it appeared that came out of a form letter, because as noted above, I couldn't find it noted anywhere above.
It was from a prior letter that they just copy and paste into it.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Sure. Thank you. I have a question for Diana, and maybe also Veronica Tam, since you mentioned that she also worked on Southern California, which is a couple years ahead of us. But I, in particular, there's one section that talks about the city being the highest resource categories and disparities of access to opportunities, wholly concentrated area of affluence, predominantly consists of households with the highest median income, a stark contrast to the rest of the region. And it says, have you done enough to promote housing mobility and increase housing choices and affordability throughout the city, but especially in lower density neighborhoods, which seems to suggest the idea of changing zoning more than in the downtown core?
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that. We had, I believe, five 6 different actions that we included, that we discussed with HCD about how to increase opportunities outside the downtown in lower density areas. Those 6 items, when we had a conversation with Paul McDougall about them, he said, yeah, these look good. If you can reach 150 units total between the 6 items, that should meet the mark. So it is unclear whether it somehow was not clear to them how we had structured where we put those mobility actions. We pull them out. They wanted us to add more metrics as well. But the language, that sort of preamble language, is language that's also boilerplate, because this is what they say every single time.
You mean the language I just read?
Yes.
And so my question maybe for Veronica in Southern California was, when you've seen this language used, what remedies, what were the type of solutions or that would address, what are they really looking for when this is said?
Well, before we get her on, I'll just say that, as I said, the 6 items that we had, including, 2 to 4 units within an existing single family zone, upzoning from 17 to 20 acres, the DU per acre in the D1 areas, all those, the FBOs, all those actions were consistent with what they wanted to see last July. So it's not clear if they missed that, because we have a new reviewer, but that's one of the things we're going to talk about tomorrow, is those 6 items. And says, you said they were sufficient last year. Is there something we missed?
Right. Okay.
mean,
Can Ms. Tam also comment on that?
Yeah.
Well, love to hear just.
Before we call her in, just a follow-up on part of that. What does it mean to promote housing mobility in this context?
It means to provide housing that is not for above moderate income in above moderate income neighborhoods. It is to provide either units that are smaller by design, increasing density from low density to slightly higher, so that you get a product that's so-called missing middle. Those are the things that they're looking for, allowing people to move into neighborhoods that are highest opportunity, high income neighborhoods who may not be high income themselves.
Okay. All right. Even though the entire city is a high resource.
Yes.
So you have higher resource areas within the high resource.
But they specifically request it in low density neighborhoods. Lower density neighborhoods,
So
I
I
should
guess
say.
the question then is, are other cities being asked the same thing?
Absolutely. Danville was asked that. Belmont was asked that. Actually, San Mateo asked that. They've got a number of programs that they're doing that are, the situation is different in both San Mateo and Danville, because Danville actually did the rezoning as part of its adoption. So they created opportunities during adoption, which you haven't yet.
Yeah, I've got another question after we talk to Victoria Tan.
So can you bring Veronica on? Okay. Hello, Veronica.
Veronica, welcome.
Hi there, this is Veronica Tan with Veronica Tan Associates. Yes, absolutely. I think the mobility issues is probably the most difficult for a lot of communities similar to yours. In Southern California, been working with some pretty high-end communities, currently Beverly Hills. I think we're actually 99.9% there. And what Beverly Hills ended up having to do is similar to what Santa Monica had to do, to allow for more ADUs, to promote, like more proactively promote ADUs, to allow more ADUs. That's how Beverly Hills actually get their certification, addressing the mobility issues. I have other relatively small communities and very also consider high end too. The city of Westlake Village and the city of Bradbury. Those are communities quite similar to you and even smaller. Bradbury is a population of only 800. And so the mobility is creating more housing choices in lower density neighborhoods. What HCD is asking for is because your entire city is higher resource or highest resource, within those areas, there are still higher income neighborhoods and lower density. So that's what you would have to address housing choices. How do you promote, how do you facilitate also having people that may be lower or moderate income with the ability to move into smaller units, ADUs, and making ADUs available for rent? Those are some of the actions that Diana and staff are working on to kind of really detailed how we're going to address it. But certainly that is a very, very consistent ask from HCD. Other more affluent community that I have worked with facing the same issue from HCD would be like Marin County, San Ramon. San Ramon had to commit to upzoning their medium density neighborhoods, not necessarily the lower density neighborhoods, but the medium density neighborhood from 12 to 15 units to the acre. Marin County, we had to do some kind of additional mobility actions as well.
Thank you, Veronica. Are there other questions? Back this way. Okay.
Follow up. I think it's fascinating that you mentioned that one of the ways out, well, one of the solutions for Beverly Hills is more ADUs. I don't know if you're familiar with the ADU situation in Lafayette, but if you are, address this to Great, what more could we do with respect to ADUs? Because that's sort of at least I see it as an area where we're really trying to push the envelope, including, as I've requested many times, a specific staff person within the planning department being the ADU czar to promote ADUs. I'm just wondering what more we could do, because looking at the letters that are going to HCD from housing groups, they're saying that Lafayette should not be allowed to claim 27 ADUs per year. So we have this conflict going on.
Well, before I let Veronica jump in, I just want to mention that we do have an additional a JADU action within the mobility, a second JADU to allow for lower income. That's one thing. But the problem with projecting ADUs, unless we have like committing money to building ADUs, we can really only go by what we're actually producing at the present time. We are not able to project more than that unless we had an incredible program that would, fund ADUs for lower income households. That's not a program that you have. And also Beverly Hills has its own problems that are very different than Lafayette. So I don't want us to conflate the two. But I don't know if Veronica has any other ideas about ADUs.
I think there are two different things about ADUs. It's one thing that you cannot count more than your trend for the purpose of adequate sites requirement under RENA. That's a totally different matter. With the mobility issues, you actually can project more units of ADUs by being more aggressive in your program actions. So the two are separate topics. For calculating how much sites you have for the RENA, how much you can get credits for your RENA, you can only based on trend. But for addressing mobility issues, you can be more aggressive in your program actions. And what Beverly Hills and Santa Monica does is that they are, whatever state law allows in terms of the number of units on site, they will allow one more. And so it would be units that you can have one more separate, like attached or detached ADUs, or you can allow for 2 JADUs. So the total number of units on a single family lot assuming that they can meet all the standards that are, that is prescribed by state law, you can get one more unit. If, I think both Santa Monica and Beverly Hills, do, is that if you do deed restrict that one extra unit as rental housing, not necessarily affordable housing, assuming rental housing in a community like Beverly Hills, Santa Monica would be more affordable in general. So, so that's what those two communities are doing.
Thank you. Okay, I'll
I have a bunch.
Right, yeah, that's right, but that's right. So I did notice on the response letter, obviously they're talking about programs, you know, and I was looking at some other, you know, approved housing elements around the Bay Area, and there's a lot of time spent on programs. I mean, pages per program talking about it. As near as I can figure, our programs are discussed in a cell in an Excel spreadsheet. I mean, this seems like are we surprised at this? It seems like we were asking for trouble. We talk about programming, we give 20 words on it. Are you surprised? I guess I'm kind of curious. Do we need a different kind of structure to talk
No,
about the
I don't
program?
think so, because you have so many programs, as long as the program has what your quantified objective is, what's your target area, what's the number of units, and when you complete it by, that's what they want to know. It's actually a lot of jurisdictions, like San Mateo's has a very large spreadsheet that's very similar to the one that you have. Danville has one that's like yours. Many of them have them that are pretty straightforward. You don't need to like overwhelm them with verbiage, because they're not going to read it, number one. And number two, we want to say, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it, and this is when we're going to do it.
Right.
So I'm not bothered by
You're not
that at
worried
all.
about that?
No. What they've asked us in the programs is clarifications of existing programs. They've not said your programs are all wrong, you don't have enough information in them, unless it's missing, let's say, a metric or geographic area. That's very minor to what they have been asking for from before.
I would just comment real briefly on that, I think it is an implementation plan. So when I look at it that way, I think that way it's presented is actually effective to discreetly put that there. But thanks. That's a discrete information that we seem to be missing. Councilmember Kendall.
Thanks. So a couple questions, and I sent them to you guys on Friday. So there was one thing, explain what HCD comment about the FAR, the FAR for the non-vacant sites. What does that really mean?
That is, when we are in our inventory, we have a series of criteria against which each site is going to be measured in terms of its feasibility for redevelopment. And we have set up something called tear sheets, which is an attachment to Appendix C that goes through each site and illuminates what those items are. What we've been asked to provide, which we have, but it hasn't been clear enough, is why did we pick this particular FAR, which at the moment, what at the time was 0.6, as that's the threshold. Anything under that is ideally developable. We've since gone back and redone some of the metrics and have actually downward. Now it's going to be downward, I think, to 0.5. Anything less than 0.5 FAR is one criterion out of several for a site that has a good possibility of being redeveloped, along with other things. And the reason is because we give examples of about, 15 different sites, which is you haven't seen yet. We have 15 different sites, what they were before they were redevelopment and what they are now. And so we're seeing basically any site that's less than, the average has been 0.3, but any site that's less than 0.5 FAR is 3 or 4 times, are being redeveloped at 3 or 4 times what the existing FAR is. So examples are Outdo, the mill at Brown Avenue, whatever, Hoff, all these started out as a low FAR and are being rebuilt as much higher FARs, showing that there's clearly an interest in picking up especially sites that are with a sea of parking around it to be redeveloped. And so that language, which we're going to add some more verbiage into the housing element that explains that in more explicit detail, which we didn't have.
Okay, thank you. So why so you say that getting like John's question, getting all this information on the non-vacant sites, and you say that that's actually easy. I'm really surprised that you said that. I just think that the information that they are asking us to give them to prove that a site is able to be developed or not, it seems that the list is like this long of the things that we have to provide them.
We've already provided that. The only question they have now, they've seen the spreadsheets, but they just want an explanation of how we came to the threshold of 0.6, which we're actually going to put at 0.5, which is more conservative and makes more sense. So that's the only issue on the site analysis that they've asked us about.
No, they're asking for lease information and they're asking for
They're
all that stuff,
asking,
right?
what they're asking for anything that might potentially be a constraint to future development, which we list on each one of those individual sites tear sheets. The criterion if a site is either has a vacant use or is vacant land, that means you don't even have to have any further, meet any further criteria. If it's got a developer who's interested or an owner's interest, we don't have to prove anything more. Then we have low FAR, similar to a site that has been redeveloped, which we have a lot of, age of the structure, which is more than 30 years old, because anything older than 30 years is typically at the end of its cycle and probably will not meet something like ADA. Improvement to land value under the state's criterion has its rule of thumb is basically anything less than 1.0 is considered developable, that it's actually not, the land is worth more than the property that's on it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you meet enough of those criteria, then you can call that that site is available for redevelopment. With respect to leases, the only issues that we've had with leases had to do with the city hall building, and any other place that we've discussed leases where we know we provide information that those leases are month to month. So any of the sort of larger developments that we had an issue with, I mean, to be perfectly honest, Lafayette Lane was fully leased at the time, I believe it was fully leased at the time that it was purchased for redevelopment. So the lease in and of itself is not the only predictor of whether or not a site will be or is not redevelopable. So we have to show all the criteria that go into demonstrating that it is redevelopable within the 8-year period.
Okay, all right. So the next one was, so this is the one that we brought up at the last meeting in November. And why do we still use our RENA allocations for our sites, the percentage distribution, instead of all these other cities that just identify them as an affordable project or not? And I know Danville started off like ours, but struck it down.
No, it did not strike it down. It has been slightly modified to address a few sites that had to be, and Veronica can talk about that.
Okay.
San Mateo also remained in the same distribution, except for a couple of sites that had to be tweaked because the developer didn't want to do as many units on the site at the income mix that we had. So those things they're roughly the same. And as we really, I feel strongly that we've demonstrated very well the rationale for doing this is a solid rationale that was accepted and approved essentially by the state to ensure that the risk of any single site going if it's all very low income, we assign it all very low income, but it's actually all above moderate, that we don't instantly have to go into no net loss. And that's why we use that. There's been no discussion in any of certainly not in this HC letter, having any doubts about that this is a good way to do it or there's a problem with it.
But we can use the other way if we choose to, right? We can.
Well, that, I believe that issue was already adjudicated by this body when we met in November.
Right, and I understand that, but when you've got 40, like almost half the cities using that other method, and HCD allows it, and the Beverly Hills lawsuit proves that it stands up in court that you can use it. It is a completely viable, and if we change, if we change very few units into that model and bump, especially on our vacant sites, we can hit that 50% threshold, right? Where over 50% of our housing is going to be on vacant sites. And that makes all the justification for all of the opportunity sites basically get drastically reduced or almost eliminated. And so we're really close to that 50% number. Now they've got De Silva and we've got the Berzoni's vacant parcels. Could we just add a couple of units to those sites, exceed the 50% margin? Because I just want to get this through the goalpost, right? I mean, the whole goal
That's exactly
is to get,
what
I
that's
know,
what
I
we're
know,
doing.
but is that another valid method for us to pursue?
I think we can broach that with HCD, and I know
Okay.
that other cities have allocated substantially larger percentages on fewer sites. And that too comes with risks, and we're familiar with the suit that you mentioned, and that there's nothing in state law that prohibits that. But I think there are arguments to be made against that as well, that haven't been adjudicated or tested by a court of law that we're sensitive to. So we will broach that with HCD and see if that is a feasible approach. And if it is, we will let you know.
Can I?
I do want to mention though, we're really trying very difficult to not go backwards. And this is going to me, in my opinion, is going backwards.
It's not that many units. It's like 40 units.
It's enough that to go back and revisit this issue, which we discussed at length, is problematic. And for the same reasons that we brought up before, why changing this midstream now is a mistake. And that's all I'll say.
Just a follow-up here. On this point, is it possible that the second paragraph under suitability of non-vacant sites on page 2, when I looked at it, I asked myself, are they inviting us to hit the 50% so we don't have to provide all
have to
this?
admit,
Yeah.
that's exactly that. I got a second. Susan's comment.
Yeah.
Because that to me, they're basically
You know,
telegraphing what they want us to
Why
do.
put this
That's-
in unless this is
it
just
is-
boilerplate?
It is boilerplate. It's been in every single one of your letters, and every letter that any jurisdiction that gets a letter like this where you use any sites that are already non-vacant, it doesn't matter how many, you'll get this comment. It's not specific to you, in my opinion, and based on all the other letters I've seen.
Okay. Well, do you think it's worth, as Greg said, raising this in the meeting just to see
Okay.
what happens?
Yeah.
Diana, if I can interject in here.
Please.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with Diana that going backward is probably going to waste more time, and also the fact that we're very close to getting the site's inventory cleared by the state. Regarding the 50% non-vacant, like vacant versus non-vacant, the problem is, and actually that's going to be on my panel for the APA conference coming in September, is that state law says that if you meet more than half of your lower income RENA with non-vacant sites, you will be subject to a higher standard of feasibility analysis. You're absolutely correct about that. You read the law right, and that's absolutely in the law. However, there is nothing in the law to tell, and nothing it's in HCD's guidance as to, well, what is the lower standard of feasibility analysis? And based on our experience working with a lot of Southern California communities, we try to push it to exactly like over 50% of vacant sites. The state actually has no different standard for feasibility analysis on the non-vacant sites, even if you meet the 50%, because there is no written standard of what is the higher standard, and therefore there's no written standard on what is a lower standard. Essentially, we're subject to exactly the same standard when you utilize non-vacant sites. The only time that the site's inventory is relatively easy is when we use almost entirely non-vacant vacant sites. That's where it becomes an easy a task. But I've run into that situation many times. At the beginning, we really try to push the 50%, but it ended up that it didn't matter because there is no established threshold or standard of analysis. And like I said, this is going to be a topic on my proposed APA conference panel, like how to do it better next time. So.
Okay. All right, good. Did you? All right, thank you. So the next question was explanation why we're still using minimum density instead of realistic capacity for calculating it.
That's solely based on what HCD allows cities to use as the metric. And Ms. Tam spoke about the difference between projecting for arena purposes and projecting when you're doing an incentive program or a program which would incentivize ADUs, for example. And past projects which have utilized state density bonus law, and we've presented the numbers here, the average, they've all in recent years used that provision of state law and produced 111%, I believe was the average. State law just does not allow us to use those, projects that utilize state density bonus law. So we must go back and use more aged, longer ago projects that don't use state density bonus law and go with a realistic capacity that is acceptable to HCD. So it's solely based on what HCD will accept and won't accept based on their guidance to us.
Okay, all right. So this one, did they comment on about the FBOs? Because we got some letters, right?
Yeah, the comment about the FBOs is that they want us to do more, add to a program metrics as well, and a, review and revise action add that we'll do outreach with developers, we'll do outreach to the communities impacted, et cetera, so that we're adding that language.
Cool. And these ones I didn't send you guys, but there are more questions. Like, since we lost Renata, right? And so now Sonia and Greg, and that is, this is a question of, are you guys able to fit this into your schedules? I mean, like, it just seems like, how much of an impact is this now that Renata's not here and we still have to approach this on our city and on staff?
It's a significant impact. However, this is, I think, our top priority, along with keeping the current applications attended to in a timely fashion, compliant with state law, deadlines, et cetera. So, coming back, we have Diana and Veronica helping. Veronica is providing more guidance and pulling examples. Diana is doing a lot of the yeoman's work to make those changes to bring back. So the impact of the two seniors leaving and also a tech was released. We, are short-staffed, but holding it together. We're recruiting for the seniors right now and are going to interview later this week. we had one recruitment that did not accept the offer, but we're hopeful. But the short of it is it's impactful, and so the timing it's going to take a little bit. It's going to take longer, but I don't think we really have much of a choice at this point in the game. I think we are, to use a football reference, in the red zone. I know Veronica and Diana are both very hopeful. I remain hopeful, particularly with HCD's engagement, that with a proper communication and dialogue, we can identify what needs to be done and get that done. But there are some open-ended questions, like Councilmember McCormick alluded to with the site's inventory. So I'm not seeing an alternative to the path we're currently on.
Okay, so it has been brought up that would it be better to hire a firm like Placeworks, who got Arindas and Moragas through the goalposts and are a big staffed company that we have a relationship with? And it's a really valid question that I think we need to be asking ourselves. Would that help?
Yeah, we can reach out to Placework and see what would be involved with that.
Councilmember Kendall, I think we can assess that after our meeting with HCD to see the amount of work that needs to go in. I know that Diana and Veronica have been working over the weekends as well to get this to complete the initial analysis. So I would recommend that we judge that after we meet with HCD, because to bring somebody on board is great, but they will have a lot of catch up to do as well.
I understand. All right. So, and so just back to that 50% thing. I know that Veronica and you guys are saying that 50% threshold is meaningless. It's not really a thing. They say it's a thing, but it's not really a thing. So the numbers that were calculated by our GPAC person, it was 39 units. We're 39 units away from getting to that 50% point. That's not very many. And we can do it on our vacant sites. And all we have to do is ease up on our RENA. And I don't agree with you with Danville's. Danville's allocations have changed substantially since last year in terms of how many they used to put in the moderate and how many they do now put in the moderate. I mean, in the low income. And so all we have to do is change that distribution a little bit and get the 39 more units on those sites to hit that 50% number.
Yeah, we'll have that conversation with HCE, pose that question, see if that's a feasible approach.
Okay.
What, if anything, would be different with respect to evidence needed in the record to justify the feasibility of the sites.
Okay.
So happy to ask that question.
And then I just one last one. Have we had any builder remedy projects come in?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Ndori?
And just to follow up on that with the builder's remedy, a timing question. And I discussed this with City Manager Srivatsa this afternoon. The paragraph that begins on the bottom of page 5 and carries over to the top of page 6. It refers to, well, we are in the situation where we have not adopted the compliant housing element within 120 days of the deadline. Then it says any rezoning to make prior identified sites available. Prior identified sites, does that refer to sites that were in our previous cycle that we're carrying over?
Yes.
Okay, and if that's the case, then the way I read this is that we're not, they will not, HCD will not find us in compliance until we have rezoned the prior sites?
Yes.
We have to do that before we submit?
No, we do it simultaneously with adoption. At least that's the conversation that the city attorney and I were just having about this.
Okay. Okay, I'm reading this to say they will not find us in compliance until we've done that.
Correct. That's what the state law requires. What HCD has done for other jurisdictions is to review the changes and say, when you adopt this, and do the rezoning, you'll be found in
Oh,
compliance.
okay.
So they'll give us a green light, a path forward to actually take those actions rather than having to take those actions in the dark with the only just the hope.
Okay,
that
thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Okay.
Yeah, separate topic. Since the housing element, since the discussions have happened, a couple of our pipeline projects, namely Lafayette Lane and Madison Park, have stopped. And in fact, both properties are on the market now. I'm wondering, and those have had certain approvals. I am wondering, does that impact us at all? Those just considered, are they still in the thing, or can we potentially, add some additional units to those? In particular, I was confused because Madison Park in our site inventory says 46 units. They're advertising it right now as saying that they're approved for 71 units. And so I'm kind of a little confused on why at least we're not 71, and I mean, I just don't know if the approvals kind of go with the independent of the owner, or how that works, or if there's an opportunity there.
Do you want to answer it?
Yeah, happy to. So the inventory is based on net new units. So we had to back out the existing units. And so does the status of the pipeline projects, not moving forward, potentially change the inventory? Yes. And so that may afford an opportunity to add some additional BMR units into the mix. Haven't done that calculation yet, but we can do that. Also ask HCD about it.
And is it now considered a vacant site? Because it's demolished.
The Madison Park site?
Yeah.
I would argue yes.
Okay.
Yep.
There could be a lot of opportunity there.
Agreed.
It's a good spot. Any other questions from council before we go to public comment? Okay, then we'll go to public comment, and there'll be opportunity obviously after.
The city council is now taking public comments on item 12A. And we'll take speakers in the meeting hall first, followed by persons in our virtual audience. Stella Witherspoon, followed by Bob McLean.
Thank you. Welcome, Stella.
Hi, good evening, council. Am I on? Is this good? Live? Okay, sorry. I didn't prepare any comments tonight, so forgive me. I'm going to be looking at my notes in my computer. One thing that we've heard is this 50% on vacant sites, and what does it get you? And one thing that I can see in this letter from HCD is that it says that the council has to make a resolution of adoption that includes findings that it has substantial evidence if not greater than 50% of low-income units are on vacant sites. So to me, that's more than just will HCD accept this site inventory or not. This is saying, like, basically, what does the city have to abide by in what it's put into its resolution? To me, I guess the question I would ask is this any kind of a legal liability to challenges in the future once you even have a certified housing element, certified as compliant housing element? So that's a question, I think, for the city attorney. I guess the other question to clarify is, what is the statutory definition of vacant? Because my recollection is that it's essentially greenfield, that, for example, parking lot that's not utilized is not. So I would ask that question, just what is the statutory definition of vacant? I'll just say Lafayette seems to be very unique to my mind in terms of urbanized jurisdictions in the state, in that it has, is it probably about 11 acres of truly vacant greenfield land that's in the site inventory right now. And that just seems remarkable, and that's something that should definitely be capitalized on if it's certainly true. I guess another question I have for consultant is just, in the current site inventory, what percentage of the lower income units are on vacant sites? because I couldn't find that defined in the housing element. There's really not much discussion about the vacant versus non-vacant sites in terms of the site inventory. They're just all listed in a large table. And I think the last thing I'll say is in the letter from HCD, notable to me with respect to the suitability of non-vacant sites is that they say that in addition to the FAR and other comments, the element should evaluate the extent existing uses impede additional development, including addressing past public commenters. And what I've seen in looking through the public comment is numerous multi-page documents from the attorneys for the Housing Action Coalition, Farella, Braun, Martel, that get into very detailed information or challenges about each site. And I think that absolutely that has to be reviewed, and those challenges have to be addressed to some degree or another, because it looks to me like HCD is saying exactly that: address past public commenters. Thank you.
Thank you, Stella. Any questions for Stella? Okay. And Stella, you asked some questions. We'll ask
Bob
those after
McLean?
comments.
Hi, good evening, Bob McLean, Lafayette. I'm a little confused, and hopefully at the end of my spiel, you will be as equally confused. So in the letter from HCD, page 4, section 2, it talks about that the city needs to clarify that complying with objective design standards will be deemed to meet approval findings. And it doesn't make a distinction between whether it's a new house on a vacant lot, whatever that definition is, or, knocking down an existing house and building a new one or doing an addition. It just says, hey, if you meet the design standards, it's deemed to meet the findings. I heard Diana tonight say that the state wants to remove any discretionary language. Again, if there's no discretionary language, that would, the lack of discretionary language would apply equally to a new house on a vacant lot or a replacement house or an addition. Tonight, there's a project down at the DRC. I sent a letter, CC'd you guys, maybe you read it, maybe you didn't, where it's a replacement house that meets all objective criteria, yet it seems to be going through a discretionary process. And so I managed to be down there at the right time, and staff said that they had run it past city attorney. And the city attorney, if I remember what the staff said, that because there is a pre-existing house there, that yes, you can apply discretionary rules. So my confusion is I'm hearing the state and the consultant saying, hey, you can't have discretionary language. And then apparently city attorney is saying, yes, you can. So that's my confusion, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Any other speakers in house?
Persons in our virtual audience, if you'd like to speak, please raise your hands now. With no hands raised, I have oh, hold on. Rob Lavoie and Libby Henry is ceding 3 minutes to Rob to speak, so he'll have 6 minutes.
All right, thank you. Welcome, Rob.
Rob, you need to unmute yourself, please. And Rob will be followed by Chris, who has their hand raised.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, we hear you, Rob. Go ahead.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Wow, this is going all over the place. I would recommend Robert Brundage's excellent letter to the City Council on August 16th regarding some of his concerns about HCD's overreach. asking for things that were specifically excluded from the legislation by the people who enacted the law because of concerns that came up during the legislative process. I'm questioning the changes for the need for the changes, all these drastic changes, height and setback reduction to merge half-acre sites when we already have a long list of successful projects that are under a half an acre. HCD seems to have blinders when we have a density bonus and they want to ignore those things, but the facts are the facts. And projects are producing 120% or more yield on less than a half an acre site. So I really question all the need for these big increases in gifts to the developers. It seems like if HCD said that the what do they call that? The migration or the oh shoot.
Mobility?
The mobility, yeah. If 150 units were going to make us compliant on the mobility, I think we have more than that on SB9 lot splits, but we certainly have it on ADUs, even using their arbitrary low projection method. We're at 200 and some units. And if we can use actual projections and logic as a finance person, then we'll have 300 to 400 units that ADUs could produce throughout the whole community. So that should handle that quote missing middle, and the idea that just because you build a small unit in the middle of a single family area that it's going to be affordable in Lafayette unless it's an ADU, I think is ludicrous. Let's see. Sorry, got so many things open here. So I think we really need to take a second look at the the ADUs for meeting that mobility issue and quite squelching the idea of expanding the area of that bubble around downtown to allow more buildings for or more density. There's, even though, well, it sounded like they were equating the remote areas just because people have higher incomes, equating that to more benefits. What do they call it? Anyway, that's not really true because the benefits are downtown, the transportation, the shopping, et cetera, et cetera. And as you get into the more remote locations, you have narrower streets, you have evacuation issues. And so I think, trying to get additional density beyond the ADUs out in these remote areas, you have parking problems. The streets aren't wide enough to even park on the street, let alone, have room for sidewalks and curbs. That's what I consider Lafayette's semi-rural ambiance. It's physical and it's geographical or geological, I guess. Anyway, I've written in some other comments, and so I won't take any more time right now.
Thank you, Robin. We did receive your comments and we have read those.
Sorry
Appreciate your
about the
time.
formatting. It was really weird.
It was challenging, but thank you for sending.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Are there any other comments?
Yes, we have Chris, followed by Max Henniger.
Welcome, Chris. Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, so I had vowed that I was gonna avoid the housing element after
Chris, sorry, before you continue, we can't hear you very well. Do you have a volume you can adjust?
not really. I'll try to speak louder. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
So as I was saying, I was hoping to avoid the housing element, but listening to some of the comments, I felt I had to chime in. Danville did not make small tweaks to their allocation. In August of 22, they had 47% low allocated to eligible sites. December of 22, 58%. January 23, 71%. These weren't small tweaks that were required by certain sites. It was wholesale changes across all eligible sites. I don't know why Diana is stating differently, because this is a city that she was the consultant for. It not only did they shift, they also reduced the zoning. They used to have 40 units per acre. In some of these areas, they were able to reduce it to 35 dwelling units per acre. I'm not arguing for less density, I'm just stating the facts. On another topic, as consultants seem to be fearing this no net loss as the big boogeyman, they might want to pay attention to the point that HCD raised with regards to FBOs. They say the element should evaluate the effectiveness of this program midway through the planning period and commit to alternative actions, e.g. rezoning, identifying additional sites by a specified date if necessary. We all know that we're going to have 0 of these units built at any of these FBOs. I think at least 2, maybe 3 have stated they don't want the upzoning. I've talked to a few of the FBOs. All they want to do is build maybe a single unit for a rectory for a pastor. There's not going to be 88% minimum density of the upzoned amount. So we are going to be facing no net loss once HCD has us perform our mid-year review, and we have 0 units to show for it in our FBOs. I think that was my only comment. Thank you.
Chris Henniger is now being followed by, Chris is now being followed by Max Henniger.
Welcome, Max.
Thank you very much. And good evening, council. A couple comments tonight, speaking as a board member of Inclusive Lafayette. The first is regarding HCD's comment about the conversion of single family to 2 to 4 units. They call out, quote, new single family uses. I think staff would be able to provide more direction on what they mean by that after meeting with HCD, but to me, that sounds like they're suggesting that this program apply to new construction, which we stated in a previous letter. We think it would make it quite a bit more impactful if you allowed for new construction what you're going to allow for single family conversions next to downtown. The second comment is around 949 Moraga Road, specifically around the comment about whether or not to keep it in the site inventory. I think that site is probably the best option that Lafayette has to create deeply affordable housing in the community in this cycle as a city-owned site. And taking it out of the site inventory, while there might be good reasons around the requirements of public land and Surplus Lands Act, I think not having the accountability of having it in the site inventory, to me would be really concerning, because I think that's the best chance that Lafayette will be able to create deeply affordable housing on any of these sites in the next cycle. And then last, I just wanted to highlight the risk of you might call it going small in the next turn of comments, trying to do as little as possible and have as little change as possible. I think the fact that this is the third round of comments suggests that HCD wants the city to make a bold commitment to further affordable housing. So whether it's allowing more missing middle housing, say applying to new construction, or any of the other recommendations that were in the East Bay for Everyone or Inclusive Lafayette letters, we encourage you to take a look at them. Because even though there hasn't been a builder's remedy project yet, the longer it goes on, the longer that could happen, the more it drains the limited staff time to focus everything on this project. So we hope that you'll take the invitation from HCD with a third comment letter to go big on this round. Thanks as always for your consideration and have a nice evening.
Thank you, Max. Are there any more public comments?
No additional public comments.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll come back to discussion. I do want to note that I appreciate the fact that staff had been very consistent in reaching out to HCD during the review period, and that we had not heard from HCD until we actually passed we're at the 60-day mark and got the letter. I do think that's representative of maybe, okay, now they're able to come back, especially with the fact that you're able to schedule the meeting so quickly. And I have heard actually in a communication exchange with Supervisor Anderson of the county that they also went back and forth quite a few times with HCD. And I think that's critical, is the communication and getting the understanding. So I think that's a given. That it is super important, and I appreciate that you're going to go back with these questions more, detailed, and taking our input as well as public comments back to them for more clarification. So with that, I open this back up to discussion and more comments.
Can we answer some of the questions that were posed?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I will come back to these questions. Let's see, where are they? Let's see. Yeah, let me see if I've caught them all. I think it was starting with Stella on the 50% on vacant sites allocation. Are we opening ourselves to maybe legal liability and challenges to this potentially, if we were to considering that route?
There is a requirement to make those substantial evidence findings if we use non-vacant sites that exceed 50%. So I think you have two issues. I think you heard Veronica Tam say that even if we did not use in excess of 50%, HCD is not changing the standard. But then separately, obviously, if we were sued, that's a standard that has to be met. So, you have two different arbiters that are requiring the standard. It seems either way. You have HCD, which may look at the substantial evidence findings a little differently than a court. So there is a potential risk. It's hard to assess what that would be.
Thank you.
Do we have less risk if we do have more than 50% legal risk?
Yeah, in theory, we wouldn't need to make the findings for a court. But as I think you heard from Veronica Tam, and please jump in, Veronica, if I'm misstating what you said, but it sounds like HCD is still requiring that information regardless.
Thank you, though.
Similar standard. Okay. What is the statutory definition of a vacant lot? And
I'm
anyone
going to
can jump
defer
in here.
to Diane. I know HCD has some thoughts.
A vacant lot does not have any structure on it. It is not parking. It is greenfield.
Okay. Let's see, what percentage of low-income units are on vacant sites? And I know that's kind of a collective question. Do you have any kind of ball?
Off the top of my head, I do not know. I'd have to go back and look and provide that information later.
Okay, thank you for that. Noted. Okay, and then Bob had a question that came out of an existing, I guess, project in front of DRC. If there is an existing house, it sounds like you can apply discretionary standards. Is that just based on what we're obviously policy now, or is that, can you make a distinction for that?
Sure, I'm happy to go over just briefly state law on design review standards, but then I'll defer to Greg and Diana about what HCD is looking for in their comment. A single family home with no ADU, we can continue to utilize our existing subjective design review standards. Depending on the project that is brought forward, we may not be able to use our subjective design review standards, but I think what DRC is hearing tonight is a single family home with no ADU. I will also note we are not able to adopt new design review standards that are subjective. So that's kind of the parameter framework, but then
Yes.
I'll defer to the team about what HCD is looking for in their comment.
Thank you, Mala.
And I will defer to Veronica because she talked about this specific item in reference to other jurisdictions and what they've been asking for in terms of objective design review.
Right. I think that the language that I prefer to, or the wording I prefer to use is what HCD is asking for is you can have discretionary review, but needs to be based on objective standards, that you have some kind of performance standards that you use to evaluate the project. What they're asking in the comment letter is that you remove subjective criteria, criteria that you anybody can come up with, you know, that well, I shouldn't say anybody can come up with. Subjective findings would be something that is, there's no way to evaluate it. Somebody would just say, well, we don't like it, and then you can deny a project based on just not liking it. But you can still continue to have discretionary review. You can continue to have design review, but based on objective criteria, performance standards, anything that's relating to neighborhood character, detrimental to property value. These are not like standards that you can use in evaluate. There's no standard for it. Then those are the things that HCD prefer that you remove. So far, this is a pet peeve of HCD. We've gotten, and during the sixth cycle housing element, I think from all the way from San Diego region up to now the Bay Area and the Monterey Bay Area, our company has worked on more than 60 housing elements, and we got them all certified. And every single one has to remove subjective findings in discretionary review process. So it's not that you cannot have discretionary review, but you need to remove the subjective findings that's codified in your zoning code.
Thank you, Veronica. Oh, yes. Councilmember Dory, please.
Follow-up question for Veronica. A number of cities, I think Santa Cruz is one, there may be many, many cities have done it, but they've adopted objective design standards for multifamily buildings that are in effect 20 to 30 page pamphlets that show examples of what will be acceptable. And I think the last time I looked at these was about 2 years ago. But does that kind of objective design standard, is that still valid? Is that something that HCD will accept?
Absolutely what they're looking for. And what it's typically the way we write the commitments in the housing element is you will remove the subjective findings. You can still have objective findings in your discretionary review that it would provide for the term that we use is certainty in outcomes. So when people meet certain standards and that are objective, even though you may be going through a discretionary review, if they meet the objective standards, they will know whether they get approved or not. But if they don't meet it, they don't get approved. But you can still continue to use objective design standards. In fact, most communities are switching to that, but still maybe larger projects, maybe mixed use projects that you go through like some kind of discretionary process, but still have objective findings in your process.
Okay, just another follow-up to that. What concerns me, I'm thinking of, well, I think Santa Cruz is one that I looked at in detail, and there are a couple of others. But now we have this request that we basically do away with setbacks, which I'm pretty sure in San Diego, there are examples provided for setbacks, not setbacks, but upper floor, setbacks.
Stepping back.
That, yes. Are these in the conflict? Is it possible for us to adopt objective standards that do provide for upper floor setbacks? Or does this letter indicate that we couldn't do that?
I don't think that is what the letter is saying. But what they are, the letter, I believe, and Diana can correct me on that, is talking about whether your height that you provide for has the ability to accommodate the density that you are anticipating. And maybe it's through the step back that they're not, you haven't convinced them that the height allows for somebody developer to actually maximize the density because of the step back. It doesn't mean that you cannot have it. You can continue to have it, except that you need to demonstrate your height limit allows for the achievement of allowable density.
I have a follow-up on that because that is that point that came out at the program 8.2 should specifically commit to revising height setbacks and upper story setbacks to facilitate achieving maximum densities, as you say. So is that separate than basically if you're allowing density bonuses, it's to accommodate achieving whatever density. So this is separate from that, is basically saying in your standards themselves, you're going to make that accommodation basically. So that means having an out parameter number of what the maximum height is in that area as your standard. Okay. Thank you.
Can I follow up? Bob's question was that, is this on residential properties as well as, or like downtown properties? Is there HCD comment? Is it more broad? Because we have objective standards and we've got objective standards for our downtown. But are we going to have to develop objective standards for all of our residential projects?
All of our residential zones have existing objective standards in the forms of setbacks and height limits. And state law would not allow for the creation of new unless we upzoned elsewhere in town that allowed reduction. I've not heard the desire on the part of the planning commission or council to adopt new objective standards for single family, but I think that is a feasible outcome if that's the policy direction.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. And I think that I believe that answers to Rob Lavoie's question about that. So he was asking clarification on that, I think. So yes. Okay. Any other questions that I didn't catch that from public comment?
There was one question about about the FBOs and the fact that we have had letters from at least two. He said two. He said three. I only saw two, but saying that they did not want to upzone and or would not participate. Is that of concern, or can we still list it? Or
it is of concern. We have reached out to the one church actually that wrote to us. We haven't heard back, requesting time to meet with the parishioners and the church leaders to talk about what this would. There's been a lot of misinformation going around in the form of a flyer that says things that aren't really accurate. The option to do whatever the FBO wants to do is still up to them, same as any other, opportunity site in the city. It will not change their ability to do whatever they want to do. It's an opportunity for them if they want to. We do actually have, I believe, 2 FBOs who wrote in support of SB4. And we did reach out to all, I believe, all the FBOs, but I don't believe we got responses except from one. The city has gotten a response from one.
Right. I know he mentioned 3, but I agree. I think maybe we've only seen the one, so that's fine. So you're not too concerned yet. You think it's really more of, I know the letter just commented about, education and outreach and so on, which maybe is kind of what we do. If we have that plan, that'd be good.
Yeah, that's what we're doing already. And that's what we've codified in the implementation plan.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a
Yes,
follow-up to that? This follows up on Chris's comment. If we get to the midterm and there in fact are no units developed on FBOs and in fact no applications, what is the consequence at that point?
Well, it's the same as it would be for any opportunity site. It's not any different than any other opportunity site. If our projections don't meet what we believe will happen, for example, with ADUs, we have to either go back and revise the number. If we fall short in the inventory, then we have to rezone or upzone some places to accommodate more units or find new sites. By that time, you know, halfway through the cycle is there are many actions that have to happen halfway through the cycle. So they're adding, HCD just wants us to also monitor it as well as the arena allocation as well as ADUs.
Okay. I've got a couple other questions. I'm still troubled by page 5 under goals, priorities, actions, and milestones. That language, this is for the permanently furthering fair housing. Is that as a result, the element should include a significant and robust suite of actions to promote housing and mobility and increasing housing choices and affordability throughout the city, but especially in lower density neighborhoods. Now, I know we talked about that a little bit, but I truly do not understand that. In our city, where we're planning to put the housing is where all the resources are. Well, you can walk to 13 years of public education. You've got the library, you've got churches, you've got BART, it's all walkable. Why, in that case, would you want to put more housing out in farther areas? And why wouldn't you at least exclude the very high fire severity zones from that, which they do in one case, but they don't do in this case?
Very valid points. In fact, what HCD goes by is the Tax Credit Allocation Committee's standards for highest resource areas. All of Lafayette is a highest resource area, highest opportunity area. That does not necessarily mean that you can walk to a grocery store down in Burton Valley. That's not what they're after. They have access to various things. It's not just, is there a grocery store down the street from you? That's not the standard that HCD is using based on for AFFH. So when we went to HCD with the robust suite of actions, we said, does this do it? And we were under the understanding that it would. Between the FBOs, where there are, JADUs, we have those would be all throughout the community, not necessarily just downtown, et cetera, et cetera. Only one is really geographically targeted around the downtown at this point. We believe that those met the requirements. But I understand your concern, but the way the law is written and the way what's the word I want? The analytics that HCD uses puts all of Lafayette as highest resource and highest opportunity area.
Right. Well, could I ask that when you meet with them tomorrow, you at least make the point that it makes no sense?
We've made that point before many times, actually, and we will do it again.
Okay. And at least on the high fire severity zones.
We agree with that, yes.
Okay. And then just another question. And I talked to the city manager about this. I believe it's true that Lafayette has never denied an application for multifamily housing, at least in the last 20 years. Is that right? And I'm just wondering how HCD interprets the fact that we've approved Miramar, we've approved Madison Park, we've improved I think it's either 9 or 11 units at 2nd and Mount Diablo Boulevard. We've approved the Samantha townhouses, and we've approved the development on Mount Diablo Boulevard, and all of those are now on the market and aren't going to be built. What does that say about the ability to get housing done? I think the city has done everything it can. But we've approved all of these things in the last few years, and they're just not being built. I mean, what more could the city do? What does HCD expect? And I'm just wondering if it's worth raising that with them to get a sense of what's happening here.
I think the state, to a large degree, understands the multitude of factors that bear on the cost of housing and the availability of housing and the cost of housing, the production of it. Recently, staff attended the Turner Center at UC Berkeley webinar on the cost of housing and what it costs to produce. And this is the takeaways for us were no different than this conversation wherein we participated with Assemblymember Grayson's panel roundtable on development fees 3-4 years ago. The state has oversight over local jurisdictions, and state law can mandate a multitude of requirements on local jurisdictions with respect to housing policy, density, et cetera. And they've taken certain steps which preempt local control, like SB 9 and ADU law. And to the degree that those are clear and implementable, great, we'll comply with state law. We will always comply with state law. To the degree that other things are amorphous and not clear, that's very challenging. And I think the discussion tonight surrounds that. So the state has jurisdiction over local cities and counties, but does not control or have jurisdiction over the cost of land, the cost of labor, the cost of building materials. And those are cited essentially as the biggest factors. The ones that they can move the needle on, arguably, is around a city's ability to impose impact fees, which are established under AB 1600, which is the state statute around impact fees, and timelines, certainty, our ability to have any discretion whatsoever about a project that's creating new units, et cetera. So interest rates are a very big factor, but not under the state control. So I think what the state sees in there, and this is my opinion, this is not the city's position. This is what my understanding of the state's action is, that they will act where they have the ability to move the needle. And there's not necessarily a lot that can be done for those other factors. I mean, I think to some degree, regulation around other good policy matters, whether it's energy efficiency or waste diversion, other things. Those are all incremental costs to housing to comply with all of those. But largely those are borne by local jurisdictions and not the state. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but I think that is the what they can influence and thus do.
Okay. And my final question on this, in the last 8-year cycle, do we have statistics that show, I mean, final numbers now that show how we did in terms of satisfying the very low and low income categories, and how that compares to our neighboring cities?
I have a spreadsheet I can send you that's got a pivot table in it that has all the jurisdictions in the state. And we can look up any ones we want. I can send that around to you guys.
Okay, great. Do
Yeah.
you recall what the percentage is for what percentage of our very low and low
We had almost no very low and low, right? And then we had a bunch of moderate. And then we have a ton of above market rate. So we really nailed the moderate.
Okay. And what about our neighboring cities?
I haven't looked at them that closely.
I think I remember there was that report card we got, and we did okay relative, better, I think, than our.
We got a better grade than
Yeah.
any other city in Contra Costa.
Well, that, I know, but that, I think you're referring to two different things though, right? There was that.
Yeah, just right. It was two different things.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'd like to see specific.
I have the numbers.
That'd be great.
Oh.
Thank you.
Back to the mobility and the ADUs, and it sounds like we can use the different projection methods. So when we put our ADUs into our housing opportunity sites, it's one number, but then for this mobility thing, we can use more realistic numbers. Can you ask them about that, to use that? Okay, cool, because that may help. And then I don't know, for me, just one last thing. This is so frustrating, just to say, and there's groups out there that are going to try to get the total cost of this cycle on cities as an unfunded mandate. And right now the state has paid back about $1 billion in the grants, but that's not covering. They're saying that the total cost to cities is about $3 billion. And that is complete. I mean, that's crazy. We could have spent that on affordable housing. And it's so frustrating. Okay, so after this meeting, that when you have it with these guys, I know other cities they almost have they've had a couple different, housing elements come out, trying different things, overlapping. Like they don't even finish the review for the one. We've been doing them all serially. And I think some other cities have actually put in, kind of multiple revisions just to see if one of them sticks. So is that an option for us moving forward, where we can get this thing, we need to take this under control and just, throw everything we've got at it and get it done. And so are there other things that we can be thinking outside the box to get this over the finish line?
I'm not familiar with the scattershot approach of having multiple versions of a housing element submitted or under consideration at the same time. We can do some research on that. I don't know if that would be a beneficial approach here. I think fully understanding what HED needs the city to do is first and foremost, and then we can, there may be multiple ways to accomplish a given requirement, and we can elucidate those for you. We'll give your question more thought, and I think, based on what we hear from them tomorrow, we'll continue to be creative in the solutions or options we'll present to the council to consider.
Thank
Great.
you, Greg.
And then one last piece on that 50% number. I think we really, our legal liability, because we've had, letters from attorneys pointing this out to us, that if there is any way that we can avoid that extra legal liability, we really ought to pursue that 50% number.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, it sounds like you have a lot of feedback here. And I know obviously you have questions of your own that you're following up and clarifying. And I do understand, based on your resources, that, the approach to multiple things might be tough right now, but I think we'll take your recommendations consider your recommendations after the meeting. So it's my understanding then, and Rup, I think we can bring this back, that after the meeting, we can get your notes, basically, so to speak, at a certain time frame. Did you want to comment on that? Okay.
Yes, I think Mayor Dawson, as Greg mentioned, I think we could have notes, presuming they can prepare notes and push that out publicly as well as to the council. So it's available on our website as well as directly to the council.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yes.
But would it be more time effective for staff if we have a special meeting some night this week, next Monday, where you just tell us what happened, and then it would be available, on YouTube or so people could view it. Then you don't have to go through a lot of effort writing things out. And I had proposed Monday, but I realized if you could give it to us Thursday night and some night this week, so we could be aware of it and maybe, raise questions with you, but not, expect you to have done a full analysis.
Yeah, I think reporting out Monday would be the best option, given that this room would be available. Planning Commission is getting canceled again. So that's an opportunity for the council to meet again, and we can, if that's the desire, we can just verbally report out at the time rather than doing a comprehensive write-up, and it allows for questions and dialogue.
Okay.
How long is your meeting with HCD? There's a lot we've talked about. 45 minutes.
They gave us, yeah.
Oh my, okay. So I think we have to probably take that. That's not much time.
That's a lot of time for
I understand. No, not much time in the scheme of things, a lot of time. No, it's more than the zero we've had. I totally appreciate that. But so maybe I'm hoping, I guess we should set our expectations correctly, that hopefully you got the prioritized list of what you want to get in, because 45 is going to go quick. All right. Thank you.
Right. And I'm hoping too, it's an iterative thing. I know HCD has many jurisdictions that they're doing this with, but that this may be the first meeting of a few more. So, okay. So in this case, staff has asked us to basically receive the presentation as we had. First, I should ask, are there any more questions, comments? Oh,
I'm not available on Monday, just so from a quorum point of view, do
Okay.
you have a quorum to meet?
I can meet then.
I will move that we continue this item to
Thank you.
Monday, whatever that is, March 4th at 7 p.m.
Thank you. The city attorney will not be available that night, and council member, Vice Mayor Kwok will not be available. I have to say, I'm not sure how much the substance of the feedback we receive tomorrow, whether that will suffice for a meeting. May I recommend that staff type up the comments and distribute it to the council and the public, and we'll work with the mayor. If we feel there is enough to justify a meeting on Monday, we will do so. If our meeting tomorrow opens up a series of other questions and maybe another meeting with HCD, we may want to wait.
Okay.
So you could consider continuing it to next Monday. But if we don't have that meeting, we'll bring it back. It's not a
Well,
public hearing, so we'll bring it back.
I'll withdraw my motion, and if you determine, I'll leave it to you and the mayor. If you think it's useful to have the meeting on Monday, then you can call a special meeting. Otherwise, we'll look for the 11th.
Yes, and then if we don't have a special meeting, we'll get those notes out, basically.
Yes. And one way or the other, the notes will come out, will be distributed. But if we can just gauge to see if there's enough for us to come back for a.
Thank you. That does make sense. And the other point is we do that, and we'd have to do that in time for public notice anyway for the meeting. So that would, if we were to have one. So we'll keep that in mind as well. All right. So in this case, then, thank you. It sounds like that's what we're going with. The note. Does a motion need to happen now? Because we're just continuing the meeting to the 11th unless one comes up beforehand. Okay. Thank you very much for this work and this update. In a way, I'm very glad to get the info.
Good luck.
Yes, good luck. Yeah. And thank you, Veronica, if you're still online. We really appreciate your assistance as well. Okay, by the way, we're still meeting here. Okay. All right, with that, we will move on. No staff reports. We'll move along to item 16. Any council commission reports?
I can
Councilmember
start.
McCormick.
I did attend the first Central Contra Costa County Solid Waste Disposal Board meeting, which was useful. I'm also on the legislative committee, apparently. Thank you to, all right. All right, well, so I mentioned I'm now on the Solid Waste District Board, and I'm on the legislative committee following Teresa's path, so that is good. I also last week did attend apparently the first code appeals board that we've had in like 5 years, and so I attended that, and that was illuminating. Went off very well. The board members were excellent, and I think it was resolved to the city's satisfaction.
Thank you, John. Yes, that was great. I know I'll be serving as vice chair for the Recycle Smart board with Teresa's leaving, and we're very the group was very welcoming of John with his more commercial interest background. So that which is a big facet of that business. Any other report?
So I actually want to follow up on at the end of the last meeting it was about the appointment process and how I was hearing, and we were hearing about it, a bunch of people that were hoping we would change it in terms of if we should always have a second meeting. That was unless it's unanimous, unless a unanimous vote goes through. If that's something we want to consider, because right now 3 votes gets it, right? That's the vote, and that's what happened, and then it went to 4, and it was great. But there were members of our community that were hoping that we would always take like the top 1 or 2 candidates to a second meeting, if that's something we want to consider. And I think the school boards do that. They pretty much count on the second meetings. And so it's something that we may want to consider. And I was just wondering if we want to bring that back.
I think we do have policy, and we followed that policy. And to your point earlier, it was a unanimous kind of vote on this particular process and this particular candidate. So I'll ask for other comment from council members.
Well, I would just note that we explicitly set the second date as a contingent date.
Oh, I'm not saying that we didn't follow our current policy. We did. We nailed it.
No, I'm just coming in terms of,
Right.
in terms of public expectation. I don't, I'm
Right.
not commenting on how
Sure.
council members understood it, but it appears that maybe some members of the public thought we were saying we're going to have 2 meetings, but we never said that.
No, it's more of a desire that we should do that because other agencies do that. And so it was just like, would you guys consider it? That's more where this is coming from.
Understood. I think I don't know if that's necessary to reconsider or bring back. I think if we want to discuss that, because it was kind of incidental to that particular meeting. And I think if it was a different outcome of that summary commentary, we would have had that second meeting. So it's built in there. But to have a second meeting after you've come to a unanimous decision.
No, if it was unanimous, then it would
Yeah.
never go to the second meeting.
I see what you're saying. And
Right.
just in terms of if it was a split vote. I think that then I'm not sure if that's a democratic process to say basically it has to be a unanimous. I mean, obviously that's the ideal outcome, but I welcome any comment on that because we want to bring this back to agenda to discuss.
Well, I appreciate Councilmember Kendall bringing this up
Yeah.
because this is what some members of the community did articulate in a meeting. And I think Councilmember Kendall as well has stated a few members of the community have stated that. But I do think that our predecessors have established a process that we've used on occasion I would say the not too common occasion that there has been a vacancy. The process, can always be improved, but I don't think our business of the council here is necessarily we have so many other important things to focus on. And if there were 500 people here saying we should change that process because it was broken, I would listen to that. But I think it is, if there are more voices that would say this is a broken process, I would use council time and staff time to address it. But I think our city has many other issues to work on in the months ahead that I would not say this rises to an issue of the city council having to look at this particular thing, because there's so many things we could improve on a little bit, but I do think in this case, it would not be something I would support using our time on. But I'm glad you brought it up, and I'm glad the public spoke about it. It is worth us knowing for the next time. Yeah.
Thank you. And I concur. Thank you for bringing that up. Any other council commission reports? No, I just have one that I met with Claudia Luna, who is our new PG&E governmental rep. And yeah, I had a good discussion. It was a follow-up, basically where Sarah Yule, our former government rep, has actually been promoted. She's now a Bay Area rep, managing the other reps right now. But it was a good conversation, and she's willing to work with us, has operations background, so understands where we're coming from as we, talk more about infrastructure, not necessarily about programs, but safety of the infrastructure. So we'll be following up with her to get more information on the different things. And I believe Councilmember Kendall, you met with her as well.
I did on Saturday, and I took her on a little walking tour of our exposed pipelines. Just to get her. It was really pretty muddy too, so she was kind of the trooper. But she is refreshing and is open to doing things a little differently than we have in the past. And we may be presented with some opportunities to get a little more transparency into the process than we have had before. And I'm going to see if we can, Gina and I are talking about what she mentioned to us, and we're going to probably bring it back to you guys and see if you'd be up for it.
Okay, and that's, I think Councilmember Kendall.
Actually, could we get a preview of coming attractions? What are the major items that are going to be on the next agenda?
Oh.
Because I know we've had a number of things that are sort of circling out there and
Yeah.
wondering when they're going to land. I'm partly asking because I read the minutes from the last meeting. There was a discussion of Nixle, and I can't remember when we're going to get an update on that, because I think that is an important thing to make sure we're all.
I did hear something really kind of alarming, was how expensive every single one of those alerts are. And they're $5,000. There's something insane. And so,
You don't push the button.
yeah, I know.
No, but I think that's a good idea to bring up, because that has been brought up by in various venues. And I know Chief Aldred was looking into that with Uniroops.
We have the results of the poll coming to you. This is for the March 11th meeting. The housing element, no parking on Boyer Circle, and Nixle is a maybe. It could be the second meeting in March. The second meeting in March is equally busy. You have the roundabout, Mount Diablo. There's a capital project in front of Diamond K, so plans for that. Speed zones, recall that you continued that matter. The housing element annual report as of now, and I think we have a PG&E discussion as well.
That's the
second meeting in March.
Right, but that's the
pipeline safety. Yeah, the tree advisory committee.
Tree advisory.
So both meetings are fairly packed. And you also have the goal setting session on Saturday, March the 23rd.
Right, and anticipate following up on that in the first week of April. I will note I will be out that latter half meeting of April. Okay.
I'd like to report on East Bay Mud, our discussions about the tower structure there. As has been previously reported, members of our community who are in the engineering field have looked at East Bay Mud's recommendation to shorten the tower and have challenged the findings that the tower must be shortened. They argue that the existing height could be retained at a lower cost than is imagined by East Bay Mud, and had written a letter 10 days ago or so to submit to East Bay Mud. East Bay Mud sent a rejoinder recently in the last few days to rebut the findings and say they disagreed. So we have a disagreement between the agency and our community members, and they're setting up a meeting next week, I believe, to discuss their differing views, and afterwards, perhaps we'll hear a report or findings of that.
Thank you for that. I know that's an intense project that those volunteers committee have put together. So I appreciate their follow-up. Okay, any other updates? No. Okay. With that, there are no written communications, so we will move to adjournment. I just want to say I'm sorry. Usually we would hit the second hour, and it has been tradition to take a little break, but so it wasn't falling in line with Greg's piece. So we'll keep an eye on that for next time, which we look like we have packed agendas. So I commit to you that I will get you guys a break. Okay. With that, we are adjourned.